Now that we've covered the configuration on the Klevu side, it's time to talk about the Magento side. An easy way to think of this is actually think of it the opposite as what we would perhaps think is most intuitive. You see, Klevu handles the search results that then appear on your website. Magento configuration handles what is actually then pushed up to Klevu. So it's kind of reversed. One controls what's sent to the other, as opposed to, like Magento controlling what shows on actually the Magento side. So with this delineation in mind, again, being Klevu's configuration controls how and what is shown back on Magento. Magento's configuration shows what or configures what is pushed up to Klevu. Now, that's hopefully that makes sense. One other thing to note is that Adobe Live Search does conflict with Klevu. So you really can't have one and the other running at the same time. I know running A/B tests would be totally awesome. But I mean, if you wanted to, there's ways to for a developer to make this happen, but it's just not possible out of the box. So with that said, I would like to go take you on a tour of what does this look like in Klevu? What are the areas that really matter to you as a store or content administrator? Let's jump over there and take a look. All right. Here in the Magento area of Klevu, or Klevu area of Magento configuration, we have under stores, configuration, drop down here to Klevu, and we can see our integration area. We already looked at that in the last video talking about how to get started on this. We see that we've already integrated our default store view, but Spanish and B2B have not yet. We could easily set that up by going over back here to Klevu and adding a new store here in stores and IP exclusions. Now, ultimately, what is happening here is we need to go over to the search configuration, and I'm going to walk you through some of the most important settings. We're going to talk about them first from the global perspective, and then we're going to zoom into the ones available in the store view perspective. This is a little confusing, and we're going to talk about what is store view here in a little bit. Most of you are possibly familiar with this, but it still is really important to understand how this works. At the global level, and being very specific, global means if we come up here to scope, we have our default scope selected here. Default config is global. So default config, then we have website, store, and the store view level right here. We have 3 store views selected here. Each store view needs to have Klevu configured individually. And a store view represents a domain name for the most part. There's some variance there, but for the most part, it represents a domain name. So we're in default config, which means the global scope. So let's talk about some of these features that are available here. Data sync settings. So how often does this happen? In a previous video, I told you that the synchronization happens every 3 minutes, but in reality, what is actually happening, it is checking every 3 minutes to see if there is information available to be synchronized. So if you kick off a full website synchronization, in 3 minutes, it's going to start chugging on it. It's going to start building those product objects and sending them up to Klevu. It's not going to happen every 3 hours in this case, but in this case, every 3 hours, it's going to see if there are updates to be made. So this is basically retrospectively looking back to Magento saying, hey, what has been changed in the past 3 hours versus once you kick off a synchronization, that's going to start within 3 minutes. Now, in this case, this retroactive look is only going to apply for products that have been changed. We have a couple of entity types that we can push up to Klevu. I'm going to make this set to no, but we have 4 entity types right here. We have products, categories, CMS pages, and orders. Products, that's given, right? We wouldn't have a search unless we have products. So you're going to have to send that up. Categories, though, are basically what is shown here on our in our search. If we search for shirt, we have our category listing here, etc. So categories are very much important to this process. They're also available in search. You're probably going to want to always have the category sync enabled. Enable CMS page sync. So if we search for example, as I had already just pulled up their privacy, our privacy policy will appear right there. So yeah, we probably want CMS page sync to be selected. Now, with all of these options, with the exception of, well, products, yeah, that too, we can disable specific pages from being pushed up to Klevu. Or specific pieces of information. And we'll talk about how to configure each one of those here in a minute. But CMS page sync, that is, you do want to keep that in mind. If you're using like employee days off or any type of internal things, make sure that make sure that you can configure which ones are going to be sent up to, or which ones are prohibited from being sent up to Klevu. Order sync. Now, this is critical for Klevu to understand what pieces of information, what products are turning over on the website most frequently, what is most popular, because they have their data, they see what's clicking around on the website, and then they see then who purchases. Really important to leave this enabled. And then, of course, when is the order synchronized? So, of course, we can also click on Sync All Data. This is going to start pushing all this up. Remember, it happens in the background, so you're not going to see it immediately. It's going to take a little while to run. All right, we're going to drop down here to Product Attribute Settings. I would default to setting this Respect is Anchor category to be No. I find... my opinion here, I find that anchor categories have been overused simply because they allow for layered navigation to be turned on. My opinion is it was a design mistake, design flaw all the way back to Magento 1 days, early Magento 1 days, where both layered navigation, the sidebar there, as well as the products in the children categories being merged up at the top, where that was the case, both of those conditions existing for anchor. My recommendation is to move away from that as much as possible and instead work to focus on drill down with links and rich text to be able to help customers find the narrow category that they want, as opposed to trying to filter through a category with 500 disparate types of products. Now, in cases like apparel, this would make more sense having them all perhaps grouped together. But in most other cases, I find it's a much harder case to build there. All right, we're going to go down into the developer settings. This is a little scary. We think, well, we're not developers, so what am I have to do here? I would recommend using this collection method. What the heck does that mean? A collection method in this case is basically where the Klevu engine selects products in a list, and then in batches, I think of 100 that by default. It takes these batches, it processes them, and then it pushes it up all at once. Usually there is economy of scale, and this leverages that economy of scale. If there is missing attributes, you're finding that data is not coming from, that is set on the product level, and it's not being pushed up into Klevu. At that point, you probably would want to consider turning this to be No. The use collection method is set to No. Now, the question you might ask is, how do we know if this information is going up to Klevu or not? I mean, don't we just do a search and the information comes back down to us? Well, yes and no. So you could do a search and say, okay, I changed this to be Phoebe 1 zipper sweatshirt, whatever, and it doesn't update. I give it an hour or two and it doesn't update. Okay, well, there might be an issue. Now, let's go over to the Klevu Merchant Center, and I want to show you a trick here. So come down into Store Info, and remember, this is which store determined by the store that we're browsing here. We come over to Catalog Browser. In Catalog Browser, we have this. We can select a particular product and see what are all the values that were set for this particular product. That's really helpful. So if we're seeing that images are not loading, or we see that the link is wrong, or well, here's the link right here, like whatever it is, we are able to very easily and quickly determine, is Klevu actually in sync with what Magento is? Now, and again, part of troubleshooting is narrowing down the cause or the location of the problem. So if we say, okay, on the front end, well, I updated the product title. The product title is not appearing on Magento search in the search bar that Klevu powers. So how do I fix this? Well, one of the first things is to go check the catalog browser in Klevu, like I was just showing you, to see what the value is there. So if I come here and it is set to, let's see, where's name attribute? In here, name right here, course parachute pant. If that somehow changed and it, then this would be a problem. We can see that the Magento has not updated Klevu yet. Honestly, I would have a hard time picturing the problem would be between Klevu sending the search results back down to Magento, like on this page. I'm guessing at least 90% of the time, probably closer to 98% of the time, the problem is going to be between Magento pushing the information back up to Klevu. That's where I'm guessing most of the problems will happen. But this gives you the tools to understand where and how this is updated and when this was last synchronized. So this is a very powerful way for you to understand what's going on in the internals. It helps you get in there and troubleshoot. Continuing on, a couple other configuration items. Back down here in metadata, by default, the metadata is set to no. Let Klevu do its thing, install it. It helps with personalization. Again, if you need to review this with your lawyer as far as privacy policy, but I suggest giving Klevu as much access as necessary so that they can enhance this experience as much as possible for your visitors. All right, so that was the global settings that you need to know. There's a couple more, but I didn't really feel like they were overly valuable to this conversation. Let's jump down to the store view level. Now remember, the store scopes are found, I'm scroll all the way to the top of the page again. We have our default configuration. This is the website level, store and store view. Real quick, global controls everything. It's like sitting over everything, but at each level can override some settings. It's usually not all settings. The primary exception would be website. With website, you can pretty much override everything in the global scope. But you get down to store, there is no configuration options there. It's kind of a weird one. I won't get into why or what that actually does. But then we have store view. So store view can edit some of the configurations in the website scope. Here's the big thing to remember. With the scoping, the global scope is used for just like all configuration, everything. The website is level right here. The website level is designed more for like feature switches and major pieces of configuration. By the time we get down into store view, this is more for configuring like languages, or I guess languages is probably one of the better examples. You can get a B2B website, a B2B store view, and have a B2C store view as well. So you can still enact significant change down at the store view level, but there's restrictions. And unfortunately, this is kind of out of the scope of this conversation to talk about how this scoping works at the store view level. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to drop down into default store view and take a look through the settings that now become available. You'll notice that there's a good number of additional settings that are now available at this level. We didn't see other attributes to use in search, for example. Now, you will see some of the same settings, and notice that it is selected as use website. So we can override this and we can disable product sync for this given store view. There's no reason to, but we can if we want. So we're going to leave this as use website. It keeps it overridden. We don't have to mess with it. Now, we can set this to be, this has to be turned on for every store view. So if you've configured Klevu, everything seems to be working fine, but you can't see it on the front end, drop into this store view, and you likely have not yet enabled the Klevu on the front end yet. So all the back-end pieces are in place, but the front end does not yet work. Set this to be yes, and click save, and likely Klevu will turn on. All right, let's drop down into search results page settings. Leaving this set here as ordering and rendering Klevu.js theme. That means that we are showing the Klevu search results here using their system to power how this looks. And again, your developers can get in and change the look and feel of the majority of this. All right, dropping down here, this is a absolutely critical one to remember or to understand here. The other attributes to use in search. So if you have other rich content on your website, for example, like the product description, I would recommend having that selected. Anything that has textual content that is relevant to a potential user search. Now, I would not recommend pushing up integer or numerical fields because Klevu doesn't really have anything to register to understand. For example, if it's a column called width or a column called maybe hertz, and you have just the number 120 in there, it's not going to render out like Klevu's. Someone have to search for like 120 for it to register properly. However, if your developer gets in there and makes some tweaks to the backend Klevu data aggregation system that pushes information up to the data feed up to Klevu, at that point, this could become more beneficial. So you could send up like hertz, like for electrical outlets. You could send up like 120 Hz or put like a 120 space hertz and use synonyms to mesh those together. So somebody could search for 120 Hz or whatever 120 or 120. I think I'm getting something mixed up there. But like you could set some of those values up like that, such that you are customizing the data feed that goes up to Klevu, and at that point it becomes more intelligent. So do not forget how these other attributes work, that they're available here. You just need to, well, configure that. This is a very important option to configure. And remember, this has to be done for every store view that is configured to use Klevu. Don't forget about this. Now, another one here, we have a boosting attribute. What is a boosting attribute? If you want a product to generally float higher in the search results, it's maybe a marquee item where you design and manufacture this product, but you also sell some other competition, some other similar products from other brands. Well, of course, you want to push your product to the top there. And so you might give it just a little boost. So if all three products are going to show up, yours are probably going to be the first in the list here. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's a couple ways to do that, and we're going to talk about more of what that takes here in future videos as far as from a rules engine goes. However, you can have control at the individual product level, which means that you can then import products in with these with this boosted value. You can edit it on an individual product level, and you could perhaps even use content staging, as we have already talked about in this course. You could probably even use that as well, although I have not tested that feature. So here's what you do. You go and create a new attribute. Remember, you create attributes over here in Stores Product, and just create a new attribute there. Then you assign it to the relative product attribute sets. And at that point, you can come back here and you can set default store boost. Now, if you set this value here, it will override any boost values you set in the Klevu Merchant Center. Now, we'll talk about how that looks and where you could actually boost products in the Klevu Merchant Center. But this boost at the product level will override the values that are going into the Klevu Merchant Center. All right, continuing down, we'll talk about smart recommendations. Yes, of course, we want to enable that. Smart category, page navigation, etc. as well. And then CMS other page content. This to note is it's really is important to keep in mind the documentation that they put on these pages as well. I'm summarizing it here, but it goes a little bit deeper than what I'm talking about here in these videos. So when we are using the Klevu.js theme, as we see indicated, those will render the CMS content. This has no control over it. When we're using like native, then of course, at that point, this does take into account. Remember previously how I told you if you had like some internal employee pages or something like that you wanted to prevent people from clicking into or seeing through the Klevu search, well, you would enter that right here. So you can select the one and of course save it, and then it will go up to Klevu and prevent these pages from actually being visible on the front end. But remember, again, this is at the store view scope right here, which means you have to do it for every store view. Not a huge deal, just keep it in mind. Okay, another one. Use configurable products image in search. Here's where this is good and this could be a problem. Let's say we sell apparel and we sell different colors of this apparel. When I search for a green shirt, notice the color that appears here. These are all green. Or we can search for red shirt, same concept. This is pretty cool behavior right here. And so Klevu recognizes we're searching for a color and it shows us product images with that specific color. If you sell apparel or things that change color, I would suggest leaving this as no. Remember, this is global, affects everything. And then Klevu will pull the image at the simple product level. So remember, we have configurable product up here, which you can put images on. And then we have the simple product level, which you can also put images on. So when you choose like a red shirt, medium red shirt, it will go find the medium red simple product, and that's what is ultimately going to be added to the cart. Well, in that same case, it would also select the image for that medium red, and it would show that in the cart as well. We have the same control here. For a quick reference, if you want to know this, product image settings right here. So use configurable product image in search. This basically directly maps to, I'm going to go into sales, checkout, and product image, configurable product image. So we can set to be the product thumbnail itself or the parent product thumbnail. So this affects the shopping cart. What we were just talking about previously affects the Klevu search results. Now, if you are mostly selling products that have the same image across all of them, again, this is like different shoe sizes, for example. It's not like there's no colors, there's no change of this imagery. Then yeah, of course, set it to be yes, and you pull the parent product's image, and it means just less images you have to deal with. One thing I would highly recommend changing is at this level, we have our image width and we have our image height. Again, this is per store view, so you're gonna have to go through every store and change it there. Klevu by default is 200 pixels out of the box. Change this to 400 at least, probably more like 600. What happens out of the box is it looks just grainy. And I'm using a high resolution monitor here. Same with my MacBook Pro here. It just looks grainy. And so by increasing the size at least to 400 pixels by 400 pixels, it makes it sharper. So instead of trying to make 1 pixel fit into, how does that work? I think 4 pixels, right? You have doubled the size, which makes it so it's very nice and sharp. I know this is a long video, but I want to take a quick second to show you how you can prevent a product from being shown on Klevu. You'll notice there in the configuration here, there's none of those settings right here. There is a way to control this. So I'm going to go up here and show you something. Include visibility of catalog. So read the note here. It says, with this disabled, only products with visibility, catalog, search, or search will be sent to Klevu. Okay, so this gives us a clue as far as how to show or hide products going up to Klevu. I'm going to come over here into products, click on one of these. It honestly doesn't matter. If you want to prevent a product from going up into Klevu, you need to use this visibility selector, not visible individually or in catalog. I would recommend leaving this set. I lost it. Here we go. I would recommend leaving this set as the default. Just leave that no. And then if you want to hide a product from Klevu, but you still want it browsable on the front end, set this to be catalog. At that point, the page is still accessible via URL. However, if you are using the catalog or the category merchandising tool that Klevu offers, it will not. It's not going to cause a problem at that point. Or well, you will still prevent this product from being shown on that category. However, that product's URL is still visible, it's still available, still can be added to the cart. It's all there. It's not going to be sent up to Klevu. So there is your rundown as far as the Magento side of this configuration. It gets a little easier now from here because we're going to talk about facets, talk about just influencing the search results as well as synonyms. Those go a lot faster. This was kind of like the big beefy area because and then we're going to dive into this customization of the search experience. Let's jump in.